Today, they discuss high leverage practice number 14, how to teach cognitive and metacognitive strategies to support learning and independence.
Welcome to A Little TLC, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of education. Join our host, Heather Volchko, as this season we focus on high leverage practices, known as HLPs. Each episode will examine a different HLP, an essential strategy designed to enhance teaching and improve outcomes across various educational settings. These practices focus on collaboration, assessment, social emotional behavioral support, and instruction, benefiting all K-12 students. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired because this season is all about mastering the HLPs. This is A Little TLC.
Teachers explicitly teach cognitive and metacognitive processing strategies to support memory, attention, and self-regulation of learning. Learning involves not only understanding content, but also using cognitive processes to solve problems, regulate attention, organize thoughts and materials, and monitor one's own thinking. Self-regulation and metacognitive strategy instruction is integrated into lessons on academic content through modeling and explicit instruction. Students learn to monitor and evaluate their performance in relation to explicit goals and make necessary adjustments to improve learning.
For this high leverage practice this week, we are talking about teaching cognitive and metacognitive strategies to support learning and independence. I've got Lathyrelle back with me this week. She is one of our school psychs. And we've been having a lot of conversations offline before recording about just the complexity of how this one shows up. My background is kind of educators view some of this cognitive and metacognitive learning as being outside of the classroom or outside of their areas of expertise, or things that are more common in like neuropsych and, more clinical. But there's some very practical ways that this shows up within our students, within the education environment. But it also looks completely different across developmental levels. And so if that's an age group, like your pre-K, your early learners, all the way up until your high schoolers, or if it's your cognitive capacity, if you've got, working in with individuals with lower incidence disabilities and some cognitive challenges. So how this shows up and what those strategies are, it's so different. And so there isn't that clean conversation to have here. So I'm excited to see, Lathyrelle, for you in your practice, when you're looking at those cognitive and metacognitive strategies, like how is that showing up either with the students you're working with or maybe even with the staff that you're supporting?
Like you said, it's very complicated. I think the main thing that when you're first starting out, you have to meet people where they're at, whether it's the student
Mm.
or the teacher, you have to meet them where they're at and move from there. Because depending on where that person is going to really guide how you work with them and what level you can actually push them to, because it's going to be a push. So that's something that you have to keep in mind when you first start to like reach into this area. One of the things you have to kind of also teach is helping them be mindful of what they're doing in the moment. It's very hard to look into your own behavior and how you're thinking in the moment. So it's good to have someone observe with intention to teach you what you're doing and how you can improve, or things that you're doing great on that you can just build upon. So I think that's one of the things, is that you have to teach a mindfulness approach to how they are teaching this to someone else, or how you're teaching this to someone else. So basically, thinking about your thinking. So he talked about that earlier. So one of the things you also have to work on is knowing and being able to accept that feedback. I think that's
Mm.
one of the things that's very hard for people, because you're not hearing all the positive things that you're doing, but you're also hearing a lot of negative things that you can work on. So I think you also have to be mindful of how you receive that feedback and what you do with that feedback. So overall, I think if you are mindful in understanding where that person is, how they're going to receive your feedback, and working with them at the level that they're at, that'll build up their capacity to teach someone else how to self-regulate, how to organize, solve problems, and be mindful of what they're doing in that moment. Another thing is that you have to give them tools. You have to teach those tools. You have to believe in those tools that you're giving them to
Mm.
help teach that mindfulness. One of the things I've learned is that not everybody's on board with the fidgets. As I taught, did PDs for, trauma-informed classrooms, we talked about cool down areas and calm down rooms and things like that, and the type of things you'll have in your classroom to support that. And one of the first things I say is that you need to know what type of fidgets you want in your room. It's not a free for all. It's not something that you just take whatever fidget somebody gives you. If you know that little noises irritate you, you may not want poppets. You may not want things that make noise, but you might want the little spinners because that could be someone, quieter. So that's something I always teach people and give them some control over that environment in their classroom. The other thing that we emphasize, because it was two of us doing these PDs, was the fact that when you're teaching self-regulation, you have to teach it like a classroom lesson. You
Mhm.
teach it, talk about the expectations, and you have to test to see if they know what you taught them. They have to practice it. You have to remind them to use it. And sometimes you have to stop and start from the beginning just because they may not be using things correctly. I had one classroom where a teacher actually had to break down his calm down area because the kids had used it like it was a recess room.
Mm.
So it was like they were throwing toys and they were just drawing all over the papers and they were taking things out of there and not returning it. And he actually broke it down. And within 2 weeks, the kids actually wrote me a letter asking to bring more materials for the calm down area. They wrote him an apology letter
Mm.
about not using it appropriately. And after that happened and I brought things back and helped them rebuild it and we taught them again how to use the items properly, we didn't have any issues with the calm down area in our classroom. In fact, we started using his classroom as a perfect example of how students, you know, don't use things properly. You have to teach them how to use it. And then, sometimes you have to restart it again. So that's just something that, you have to be mindful of where you're at and what you're willing to teach other students and just know that you have to start all over again if it doesn't work out.
That's such a cool example because then they are yes, there's a consequence associated with the choices, right? So, like, they made choices, there was a consequence, and now they're kind of, like, working back from that consequence. But then in order to maintain it on the other side of it, there is a lot of those like cognitive, metacognitive strategies that have to be in place for them to know, hey, am I using these materials the way I'm supposed to be using them? Hey, you're not using those materials the way that we're going to lose it, like all of those types of things. You've actually like created a situation in which they have to learn and perform some of those higher level strategies to be able to figure out, are we actually doing what we need to be doing, and are we doing it in the way that we need to be doing it? And then of course, like, the cool thing from that is that, sure, okay, we're using the stuff that we're the way we're supposed to be using it. Well, if it's actually meeting those needs that they're designed to meet, now all of a sudden we're tapping into really what it's there for. So it's more than just we're following the
Mhm.
rules or we're not following the rules. Now we're able to look at going, oh, now I can actually regulate myself. I'm finding myself calming down. I know when I need to step away and use that space. And now when I'm ready to return back to my, work or whatever demands are placed on me, that's the win, right? And it's just starting from something as simple as, hey, you're screwing around with stuff. You can't do that. And it's gone and now it's back. And now we're learning how to use it appropriately. Now we're actually getting the benefit of using it appropriately.
Mhm, you're right about that, and it was the same classroom. I remember visiting one day, and one of the students came to me and said, "Hey," one of the other students, and they said the student's name, "She's having a hard time in our group today,
Mm,
and she's had tears in her eyes. Do you think we have anything that could help her?" And
nice.
so now, not only was this child mindful of their own behavior, but they were mindful of others in their group and
Mm-hmm.
came to seek an adult to actually, ask for assistance and things like that. And so that made me go back and go, okay, well, maybe some journaling might help with her.
Mm.
And so I gave the student a journal book to give to them, to that student, and she actually used it. And again, I reached out to the other supports in the school and they were aware of this student. And that was one of the things that we ended up actually doing a plan for
Oh, cool.
so that she can have someone to talk to outside the classroom and schedule breaks and things of that nature. And
Mm.
so that kind of taught her how to be mindful of her feelings in the moment and using the things in the building, the resources in the building that help her get through the day. So and these are all fifth graders at this point.
Oh,
So
nice.
I mean, so this is someone that, she's going to take these skill sets and all of them going to take these skill set into middle school with them and hopefully use it and build upon it. But in the beginning, it was, it was a playroom for them. They were using
Mhm.
that, we can't go outside today because it's raining, but we're going to use the calm down area to play with the fidgets. And they took it from that level to losing it, to gaining it back, and then growing upon,
Mhm.
the experience from using it appropriately. So it was a good example and is one of those, proud moments that you have as, a educator in the field.
Yeah, those moments where you're like, "It does work."
Yes.
Well, when you were first kind of explaining how these strategies show up in your practice, one of the things that you commented on is there's this connection with feedback. And it wasn't until you said that I made the connection to go, I work with a lot of students that they don't receive feedback or they don't want to hear it. It's not necessarily a feedback issue. It's actually, can they receive the feedback? And so I know a lot of times I'm pulled into, creating intervention plans and they're all wanting to target like non-compliance or defiance. When in reality, there is that metacognitive component of, am I even understanding the feedback that's being provided to me? And am I receiving it in a way that I can then actually make change over? So
Mhm,
there's actually two other high leverage practices that are all about providing feedback. Like one, how am I providing feedback on academic or instructional learning? And then one on the social emotional behavioral learning, providing feedback so that then, behavior change can happen. But truly, both of them are somewhat contingent on that metacognitive capacity of, can I actually receive that feedback? So then the art in those high leverage practices would be, how am I giving that feedback? And so the way
mhm.
you're explaining, walking students through understanding, here's what it's for, and here's how this shows up, and here's how we're, learning and developing and growing through it. You're modeling that with them and for them, to the point that then they're noticing, hey, maybe this other person needs that kind of help too. And like, that's next level, right? I think I've worked with elementary students that are just so astute and just
Mhm.
very aware, but they don't always have like the outlet for some of those things. And it could be just because some of their metacognition is just a lot further down the road than maybe some of their peers.
Yes. And the other thing about that is that when you're providing feedback, you have to have a technique. You just can't blurt
Mm.
things out. One of the techniques that we use in general is the sandwich method. And
Mhm.
so I use this a lot with parents. You want to give them something good to talk, to talk to them about. Then you talk about what you really want to talk about, which may be, negative and they may not want to hear it, but you kind of soften the blow a little bit when you have something positive to say to them about their child. And then you
Mhm.
end with something positive. And so you might have to do that with students as well, because guess what? That student that you need to give feedback to, usually is probably hearing bad things about them all the time. So even if it's something as small as, I saw you share a pen with your peer for such and such today. I saw you give a high five or something. Oh, I like your
Mhm.
sneakers. Just so you see they can hear something positive. We live in a world that we always are trying to fix everything, that we forget that some things are already in place because people worked hard to get that way. And nobody says, good job. Nobody says thank you for those things. And those kids that don't receive that, those are the ones you're probably seeing in your classroom with behaviors. So when you provide those feedback, try to start off with something positive, and then also be mindful of the language that you use when you're providing that feedback on the negative. You don't want to be punitive. You don't want to make it seem like, oh, this is happening again. You're not really trying, but you want to give the feedback of, I saw this. You want to be very concrete about what you saw, your observation, and very matter of fact. You want to leave your emotions out of it, because once you become emotional, they're going to become emotional.
Yeah.
Because again, that goes into regulation. So you're the one that's guiding them, not the other way around. So you want to be very concrete. You want to say what you observe, and then you want to give them a solution to how to change that behavior.
Mm.
Not just, "Oh, you did this wrong, you need to fix it." No, tell me how I can fix it. Give
Yep.
them some options. And then you wanna give them with something positive, something they can leave with that's positive. "Remember how you did this yesterday? I want to see you do it again tomorrow." That was awesome. Or come see me before you go to class. Give them something to look forward to have them come back, because that's also how you develop relationships. And that makes teaching them self-regulation and strategies in the classroom a lot easier, because they have that friendship, and that, not necessarily a friendship, but they have that relationship with you. So those are some of the things that when you're providing, feedback, that you have to be mindful of when especially when you're dealing with students or even adults that are sensitive when it comes to things like that, because you never know what people are dealing with at that moment.
That's for real.
Mhm.
Yeah. I appreciate how you're framing that though, because what you're talking about is yes, there's strategies. You just broke down some very specific approaches of like, do this way, in this order. But you're also talking about that because of the way that we're doing that, we are establishing a relationship. We are establishing a rapport that then when students don't have those metacognitive capacities or they're still learning them. And so they're kind of disjointed and they're not always like really where they should be, or we have like weird misperceptions or those kinds of things. If there is that consistency, that like the relational capital that's already built in, they're going to be more open and more willing to walk that to then
Mhm.
learn that, which then means that as adults, we need to be modeling these things in our interactions just by how we're doing what we're doing. We're actually demonstrating these skills because then they see it on display and then they can start understanding it and then they can start trying it and then they are actually just doing it. But that comes from adults modeling and being those examples and not just doing it, but, like, even walking it through. I mean, I'm thinking of, like, when I was doing math intervention, doing the think alouds, that there is an aspect of that in our social emotional behavioral learning as well, that is what then can set our students up to then be able to step into that with us.
Yes. People also need to be very mindful of children are sponges. You
Mhm.
know, they whether you think they're watching you or not, whether you think they're listening to you or not, they see what you're doing. They hear what you're saying. So even if you're not addressing them, they see how you talk to other adults. And again, you're modeling, like you say. So if you're modeling bad behavior between adults,
Mhm.
that's how they think relationships between adults are supposed to be.
Yes.
Guess what happens? Not only are they gonna treat their peers that way, but they're gonna treat you that way because you have modeled that for them. So those are some of the things as a professional in the classroom setting that, yeah, they may not see it in at home or when they're outside playing, but you can model that within your classroom. So at least at that moment in that time frame, they know how to interact with each other in that classroom. So they can also be mindful of how others can work in the classroom with them, and how they work with their
Mhm.
peers. Because you'll also see how, and some parents don't like this, some kids don't like this, but you see them start to address other people's behavior in the classroom. Like,
Yeah.
we supposed to go outside for extra 5 minutes. We put all our stuff away like she asked us. So you're gonna have that student, but there's other students that's gonna help that other student get on track. So those are some of the things that you need to model and be accepting of when you when you're with your peers as an adult.
Mhm.
So when the principal comes in, they say, "Hey, can you do this, that, and other?" It shouldn't be no. It shouldn't be why. And if it's a thing of that nature, then can I speak to you outside, or can I speak to you at another time in regards to that? Because again, the kids are watching, and as they're watching you, they're going to implement that behavior with their peers and with other adults and things of that nature. So that's also something you have to be mindful of. And like I said, the kids are sponges. They are learning all that information. They're processing it all the time. It doesn't shut off. It doesn't stop because they're playing a video game. They're still listening and watching.
They may not always be learning what you're teaching, but they're definitely learning what you're doing.
Yes, exactly.
Well, one more thing I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about real quick. We were talking about it before we were recording. I really appreciated how you connected metacognitive processing with mindfulness. And I know you've used the word being mindful the whole time we've been having this conversation. And it wasn't a connection that I had made until you and I were talking. So, can you speak a little bit more to where you were saying, like, the mindfulness, and that's what, helps us regulate attention? It's what helps us kind of know our place in space at that moment, that's mindfulness, but it's also positioning us so that we can think about thinking. We're slowing the world down enough that then we can actually be present and then engage in those metacognitive strategies too.
Yes, and that kind of goes along with the fidgets.
Mhm.
So if you notice that with kids just adults, you'll notice that when they're watching something, they start clicking a pen or they're shaking their leg. Kids that have fidgets, they start spinning with the fidget a little bit more. They're moving around a lot. But when you ask them a question, they can raise their hand and answer.
Mhm.
They're they are releasing that negative energy or the anxiety that they have inside of them. It's being something where they can concentrate on without actually concentrating on it,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So their energy is being released through their hands, so their mind doesn't have to worry about, what the teacher is saying, as well as the anxiety. The anxiety is coming out in the movement, but the focus is actually in their mind, and they're focusing on what the teacher is saying. So it's a little complicated, but it's really on a neurological level, a very basic level, because once you get that anxiety, once you get that energy out, you're able to focus on things that you really need to focus on that's higher level. So that's really where that comes from, and that's why we give kids fidgets. It takes that level of anxiety out into something that's movement that's acceptable, while allowing the brain to do higher level thinking and focus on what is being taught to them in the classroom. So that's kind of like where that thinking comes from.
Yeah. Thanks for taking a second to talk about that because I know sometimes people, when they refer to mindfulness, have kind of this ethereal, like disconnect approach to it, as opposed to the way you were describing it with metacognition, which is very like heavy science, like all of those things. I wanted
Mhm.
to make sure that we connected the dots on that because I definitely had not really put that together until we were talking before we hit record. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk through how these things show up in practice. It's super complex and it looks so different for all kinds of different populations. But thank you for bringing your expertise.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you for having me again. And I love talking about this information and making sure that people really understand the different techniques and interventions that we use throughout the day for our students and the reasoning behind it, because some things are just presented to us and they tell us to use it. So when you delve a little bit deeper into it, you understand the reasoning behind it, and it does make sense. You just have to have someone kind of explain it to you and research it for you and put it in very layman terms instead of using all these technical jargon that you may not understand. So I really appreciate you having me here to give a chance to explain that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being that person. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This week, it's Webinar Week. Dive into an exclusive webinar featuring insights from practitioners just like you who've achieved remarkable success in their own corners of our education world. Whether you aspire to advance your career, explore new possibilities, or simply expand your horizons, our webinars cover a vast array of topics. Pre-recorded webinars offer the flexibility you need to fit learning into your busy life. You have the power to watch, rewind, and replay the content at your own convenience. And did we mention you can earn continuing education units too? We want to invite you to head over to thresholdlearning.org, your one-stop destination for all things TLC. Here, you'll find this episode's show notes and blog pairing, our entire catalog of ACE-accredited self-paced courses, an ever-expanding bookshelf of resources, and anything else we've talked about. See you there. Attention educators pursuing behavior analysis certifications, Supervision with TLC is designed for educators like you, offering remote supervision with school-based BCBAs that fits into your schedule instead of the other way around. Our supervised fieldwork approach allows you to earn your hours right in your classroom alongside your teaching responsibilities. Benefit from affordable rates, month-to-month scheduling, and comprehensive supervision, all 100% remote. Our school-based BCBAs are here to guide you every step of the way. So why switch jobs when you can stay in education and grow professionally? Explore more at thresholdlearning.org/supervision and see how we can help you succeed.
Students with disabilities often don't naturally employ learning strategies to boost their academic performance the way their typically developing peers do, which is why these strategies need to be explicitly taught. A key point to understand is that learning strategies aren't just step by step instruction. Instead, they serve as tools or heuristics that guide students in using high order thinking or applying complex skills. As Rosenshine and Meister described, these strategies facilitate learning rather than dictate every move. When students use strategies, they're engaging in a dual layer process of problem solving. First, they apply a cognitive strategy to a task, such as predicting outcomes, summarizing information, or making sense of context. On a higher level, metacognitive strategies kick in. They help students monitor their own performance, self regulate, and make decisions about the effectiveness of the approach they're using. The goal is to turn students into proficient problem solvers, enabling them to self monitor, identify problem areas, create solutions, and assess their own success. In essence, teaching students these cognitive strategies is about teaching them how to learn. These strategies are highly versatile and can be applied across various subjects and skill areas. Whether it's using strategic reading techniques, employing models for writing like the Self Regulated Strategy Development or SRSD, or solving math problems with schema based instruction, the core idea remains the same. Even strategies focused on memory retention, such as mnemonic devices or self management techniques like self monitoring, serve to empower students to take control of their learning. The most effective way to teach these strategies is through explicit instruction. This involves highly structured lessons where teachers model the use of the strategy, guiding students through practice, monitoring their practice, and providing feedback. During the modeling phase, teachers don't just demonstrate the task, they think aloud, showing students how skilled problem solvers approach and process tasks. This think aloud technique also strengthens students' metacognitive abilities by teaching them to reflect on their own thought processes as they work through challenges. This combination of strategy use and metacognitive development is what ultimately helps students become more independent and effective learners. Cognitive and metacognitive strategies are powerful tools designed to help students become more self directed and independent in their learning. While some students might naturally figure out strategies on their own, students with disabilities often need direct, explicit instruction to learn these strategies. This is where teachers play a critical role by teaching not only the strategies themselves, but also when and how to apply them. When teachers explicitly teach these strategies through modeling and guided practice, it's been shown to be highly effective for students with disabilities across various content areas. It's essential that teachers carefully select the strategies they introduce. This isn't just about picking any strategy, it's about using data and working collaboratively with colleagues to choose the approaches that will be most impactful for each student. The goal is to ensure that students are set up for success and that these strategies become a natural part of their learning process. One of the key components of this instruction is feedback. Teachers need to provide students with regular feedback on how they're using these strategies, reinforcing their application over time and across different learning settings. This helps to cement the use of strategies, ensuring that students continue to benefit from them in the long term. In short, teaching strategies effectively isn't just about the initial lesson. It's about guiding students to internalize and apply these tools, giving them the skills they need to thrive in their education independently. Teachers who effectively teach cognitive and metacognitive strategies play a crucial role in helping students become self directed and independent learners. They are particularly adept at recognizing learning or behavioral difficulties and use cognitive strategy instruction as a tool to empower students. One of the key things these teachers do is draw from evidence based practices that are already proven to address specific student needs. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they use strategies that have been shown to work, adjusting them to fit the individual learner. Task analysis is another vital aspect of their approach. By breaking down goals into smaller, achievable steps, these educators create a clear path for students to follow. They then teach this process explicitly, ensuring that students understand not just what to do, but how to get there. For tasks that require self regulation, things like setting goals, self monitoring, and using positive reinforcement, teachers provide direct instruction, guiding students in developing these essential skills. Strategic instruction models, such as the self regulated strategy development or the strategic instruction model, are frequently used by these teachers to boost student memory and information recall. Through these models, they deliver highly structured lessons that break down strategies into manageable chunks. Teachers often demonstrate the steps using think alouds, a method where they verbalize their own thought process to show how effective problem solvers navigate tasks. This modeling of inner language is critical for students to learn how to monitor their own strategy use. Moreover, teachers ensure students have plenty of practice with the strategy in different contexts and over time. This variety helps students generalize the strategy to new situations, which is key for long term success. Monitoring student use of strategies is an ongoing process where teachers check for fidelity and assess whether any modifications the student has made might affect the strategy's effectiveness. This careful balance of explicit instruction, practice, and feedback helps ensure that students not only learn strategies, but also apply them independently and effectively across different learning environments. For school leaders, supporting teachers in effectively implementing strategies is a critical aspect of fostering student success. One of the key responsibilities is to ensure that educators have access to ongoing professional development, instruction, or coaching in a variety of strategies that can be applied across different educational settings. This equips teachers with a broader toolkit to address the diverse needs of their students, helping them implement these strategies in ways that enhance learning outcomes. It's also important for school leaders to actively monitor how teachers are selecting and using these strategies, ensuring that they align with both the students' needs and the grade level curriculum. Feedback here is vital. By providing targeted guidance, leaders can help teachers refine their approach, making sure the strategies chosen are the best fit for the challenges at hand. Additionally, staying on top of the latest research is essential. School leaders should not only keep educators informed about new strategies emerging from research, but also ensure that the necessary supports are in place to help teachers successfully implement these innovative approaches in their classroom. This kind of proactive leadership creates a dynamic learning environment where both teachers and students can thrive. Cognitive and metacognitive strategy instruction covers a variety of techniques aimed at transforming students into self-directed and independent learners. The effectiveness of these strategies has been well documented across numerous studies and different content areas, demonstrating their value for students with various types of disabilities. When these strategies are taught explicitly, using clear modeling and guided practice, they significantly enhance students' ability to manage their own learning processes. This approach not only supports academic growth, but also builds essential skills that help students navigate and succeed in their educational journeys. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Don't forget to join us next week for an enlightening conversation with Mary Mangione about high leverage practice number 15, how to provide scaffolding supports. It's going to be a great one.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider dropping a like and follow Threshold Learning TLC on Facebook and Instagram. And if you like our show, share the podcast with your colleagues. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to promote the podcast. Let them know that they can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else they catch their podcasts. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can also email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there.